There's a lot of kids out there who need your help, and a donation to St. Jude could potentially save them. Link to my fundraiser is in the description. Also, expect a quick word about them at the end of the video. Hey, wait a minute! What's this intro doing here? Look, this intro's been great after all these years, but I think I've got to move on to something different. Where's my new one? Oh, here we go! That felt good to start the new year out on. Thanks to all those who contributed to this visual overhaul. I've always thought about when I should change how my channel looks, and to see everything come together feels wonderful. You all are awesome. Keep up the good work. So anyways, how was everyone's 2022? Well, all I can say is that it was very quick and very weird. Everyone had a weird fascination with Pinocchio, Ash Ketchum became world champion at 35 years old, Sylvester McMonkey McBean did not treat his pet birdie very well, everyone learned the secret art of morbing, and tons of incredible games came out last year. In fact, I'd like to say that if there was a game lineup that I think deserves to be called a worthy follow-up to 2017, it's the one from last year. I can only recall a couple of games that were generally negatively received for their quality, and for almost every month, this lineup has been scoring home run, after home run, after home run, after home run! The good games wouldn't stop coming! It's to a point where I'm legitimately excited to see everyone's personal takes on this topic, and just how different they'll truly be. Sure, we might see some games shared between takes, but most will be complete wildcards, and I'm totally here for it. And this is where I step in. Usual countdown rules apply, rules not allowing DLC or remasters apply, so let's see what 2017-2 really had to offer. Even though I think we've had a large amount of amazing titles from larger companies last year, I think the indie games deserve just as much attention. We've gotten so much from smaller development teams out there that are interesting, and pick up the slack left behind in a few cases. But I will say, one of the biggest ones to receive promotion from larger companies was a little game called Stray, a game that places you in control of a cat in an apocalyptic setting. Untitled cat game. I was very interested in Stray when I first heard about it, and I was not disappointed when I picked it up. At base level, you're just controlling a cat jumping through this world, but it's how the game decides to handle it that makes the game so strong. The fact that you are a cat leads to exploration feeling a lot more interesting, since they don't exactly function like your average game protagonist, and witnessing the game's story and lore through its perspective is really intriguing. There are plenty of dialogue sequences despite the cat not saying a word, and yet, it doesn't feel like the game is over-explaining anything. It's fun to learn about just what happened here, especially through collectibles, but witnessing it as a cat does make it feel far more imposing and larger than life, since they don't always perceive everything the same way humans do. The game in general takes full advantage of the fact that you're a little feline on all fronts, and builds something actually interesting around it to make an experience that's hard to find elsewhere. Also, the fact that the game goes out of its way to include things a cat would actually do, like allowing you to scratch surfaces and including a meow button, is an instant 10 out of 10. I don't make the rules. Hey, speaking of indie titles, how about we talk about an indie sequel? Because those can deliver big shocks as well. I didn't hear a ton about Gunvolt 3 when it first came out, and that also applies to now. And I think coming out the same weekend as... that did not help matters. But to me, out of every Gunvolt game, 3 is my personal favorite. I was already a big fan of Gunvolt 2 as it was, but it was hard to tell what a Gunvolt 3 would actually bring. The answer to that is something I admit I wasn't expecting, but I mean that in a good way. In terms of how the game is set up, it's about what you expect, making your way through stages to get a high score, and defeating bosses until you get to the end. But making Gunvolt into basically a power-up, and relegating the newcomer Kitty into the main role, turned out way better than what the idea initially sounded like. Recontextualizing the tagging and zapping into a new form in a way that encourages keeping the speed going makes the additions to the controls feel far more free-flowing than before, but the game will definitely reward you more for good reflexes. I feel the skill floor for the more competitive moments feels just right for everyone, and none of the accomplishment for playing really well from the last few games is taken away. The bosses are all a blast, as they're fast-paced and have patterns that are fun to learn and hard to get used to if you're doing things like no damage runs. While I'm not fond of the way you get image pulses, The image pulses themselves are still a neat mechanic that let you better prepare yourself for stages. Really, this is a game I can easily come to for short bursts of excitement, and it grew to be my favorite of the main Gunvolt trilogy, especially since it was a gift that kept on giving with new bosses, new features, and an epilogue with a new playable character. Where does Inti go from here? Who knows? With how popular Fire Emblem Three Houses has become within the Fire Emblem community and Switch owners, as things like Fire Emblem Heroes have exemplified, and with Koei Tecmo previously doing a Warriors game within the Fire Emblem universe, and then changing direction to Warriors crossovers with one single game, War of the World of Three Houses was bound to happen at some point. Well, last year it did, and it was pretty sweet. The biggest thing I appreciate about Fire Emblem Warriors 3 Hopes is it finding a proper way to mix staples of Musou gameplay with staples of Fire Emblem. Movesets being class-based allows for different ways you can customize your units and experiment with their stats and what they can do, not to mention it makes any clone aspects easier to swallow. While it is a bummer that so few classes can wield more than one type of weapon, even when some logically should, I enjoy just going around and trying new classes for everyone to really care. The game encourages this for skill inheritance and preparing for a specific challenge, and you can transfer all this progress over to a New Game Plus file, so you can pick it right back up, or just go ham with what you already have. Combat in general feels great, as the special attacks look marvelous, and the character's advantages against specific enemies do allow for different ways to approach each and every map. All those combined with arts a character can have, and the team-up mechanic, makes every battle a joy. While I am mixed about the story overall, characters are all still lovable, and the new moments they get do add a bit more to what's been established, with the new faces adding on more. I think it helps that this is set in an alternate continuity, so the writers can focus on what they want without too many rules tying into Three Houses, and let every character do whatever, including giving Felix this moment.
Felix? Why do you have a cat?
Picked it up.
Wait a minute, that cat's in the wrong game. What's going on? In conclusion, Fire Emblem Warriors 3 Hopes is a great time and a solid continuation of the direction Koei's taking with these crossovers. And judging by the fact that this is the third year in a row I brought up a game like this, I would not be surprised if they went ahead and announced another one soon. Not that I'm against that. I am overjoyed that we got so many 3D platformers in this past year. The genre has been slowly but surely coming back into the public mind in recent times, thanks to all the efforts of several development teams, big and small. But among its biggest accomplishments was actually giving Kirby a chance at that Z-axis. I mean, Kirby has had a few smaller opportunities in 3D, but they were more so proofs of concept. Kirby and the Forgotten Land decided that it was finally time for Kirby to make a name for himself in 3D. And man, did it rock my socks off! The Forgotten Land has plenty of memorable levels that always know how to be interesting, whether they get expansive with all our challenges, or more condensed to focus on moving forward. Despite the linear nature, it feels like they took a cue from Collectathon 3D platformers with the hidden qualities and the mystery objectives that you might be able to figure out through context clues. The game is not only thrilling, but it also rewards you for your curiosity. Mouthful mode is also welcome as an extra to Kirby's arsenal and to the levels themselves, and the modifications to the copy abilities are also great. The general roster of these is smaller, but being able to upgrade them with gemstones and star coins is a ton of fun. With the added dimension and these changes, I feel like this game has some of the best bosses in the series. They're all very climatic and are constantly changing things up. I also find Wallaby Village very endearing, the game does a great job with handling its post-game, and every bit of this game is just overflowing with charm and passion. I am so happy that Kirby made a successful jump to 3D, and I cannot wait to see how they take it further. Heck, with this, Dream Buffet, and Return to Dreamland Deluxe, hell is basically spoiling us. As I've said in the past, I've been into Star Wars all my life, and I've always taken a liking towards LEGO. As such, as a kid, I played a bunch of LEGO games. I still have fond memories of them, especially with my brother, and I do think they're still pretty solid, some more than others. Sadly, as they became more common, I got burnt out of them, not helped by my brother and I slowly getting more to do with our lives. And while more modern LEGO games did pique a small bit of interest from me, well, it was just that, small interest. Well, except one. And I think you know where I'm going with this. With the initial announcement confirming that this game would cover all 9 mainline Star Wars films, and they bring back mumbling into the cutscenes like in the older games, I was definitely very interested. That only went up when they showed off more and revealed that the focus of the game would be more on exploring the planets featured in each film than anything else. I'm sure it was an absolute nightmare to work on all of this while working around the pandemic, not to mention the large amount of delays, but in the end, Traveler's Tales' hard work on LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga paid off immensely. All the worlds are massive and feel like proper representations of their respective planets in the films, and there's also tons to do and collect in them, going as far as to side quests that take you to different planets, give you new boss fights, or unlock completely new content. The game is always rewarding you for exploring and thinking outside the box, and given how much there is to collect, I'm glad it managed to not get tiresome. Levels are also not overly long, so you won't have to backtrack too far if you miss something, which you will in story mode playthroughs given how they like to hide secrets behind character-sensitive puzzles. Combat also borders on character action games surprisingly, even with droids. There's a lot of different combos you can pull off, and depending on your button patterns, you can outright juggle some enemies, which is very gratifying. Space battles are also a blast. I love how they retold the story of each movie in a very comedic yet reasonably faithful way, and I always felt validated for becoming as fond of the series as I have, with how much of it was celebrated, or even mocked in several instances, like with all the references to popular memes, actually roasting dumb things in films, Rise of Skywalker especially, and just going ham with Kylo Ren's love for Darth Vader and his abs. This is what peak perfection looks like. And speaking of validation, I immensely welcome the DLC that actually brings in characters from various spin-off movies and shows into the mix, including characters from Clone Wars. Yes! I shouldn't find it funny how Rex was included in this pack months after my joke about him not being there, despite clones that look just like him were present. But I kinda do. Skywalker Saga as a whole feels like it was made by people who dearly love the franchise and wanted to make something every fan could enjoy, while still supplying a genuinely fun game on top of that. It must have been excruciatingly hard, but in the end, the game makes a fine addition to everyone's collection.
Hey, that's my line!
Grievous didn't patent that line, so it's technically open source.
I'll be expecting my royalties by the end of next month.
While this doesn't always happen, if I choose to get a title from Platinum Games that I'm at least interested in, it usually ends up being one of my favorite games of that particular year, and Bayonetta 3 is no exception. It may have taken us a while to finally get this game, but if you ask me, it delivered everything I wanted it to, and then some. Combat's still an absolutely roaring good time, since there are so many different weapons and new infernal summons to try out, all of which can lead to satisfying combos that look and feel dazzling. Each one also has different properties like range, attacking speed, and damage output as well, so it's really fun to experiment and see which ones you like the most. There really isn't a weapon that I don't enjoy using, even if I have my preferences. World traversal as a whole feels a lot better here, since the general design rewards you for thinking outside the box with some neat collectibles, or optional encounters which give you even more things to do. Heck, sometimes infernal summons are used for puzzles, which I thought was great for giving them more meaning outside of combat. The boss fights are still spectacular, and absolutely still the thing I look forward to the most in the game. The addition of Viola as a playable character is very welcome as well. Despite her not getting as many toys to play with, she still can hold her own with her katana, Cheshire, and her fists, and I feel like she gets at least enough to make her not exactly feel like a pace breaker. Also, the fact that she activates switch time by parrying makes me think Platinum made a sequel to Metal Gear Rising in Bayonetta, which is probably the closest we'll get to a sequel to that game. Bayonetta 3 is not only an absolute joyride from start to end, but it also gives you enough reason to come back for more, with all the challenges that can lead to side chapters. And come back to it more, I will. I personally prefer Bayonetta 2, but Bayonetta 3 is still a fantastic hack and slash at the end of it all. I honestly love it when I decide to try out a game, primarily because of what other YouTubers in my circle have to say about it. In my case, it has led to a lot of big franchises I don't know I would have found otherwise, let alone consider, but it has also led to a lot of smaller indie titles I don't know if I would have found on my own. I say this because the Spark the Electric Jester games are one such example of this. I do think the first game does have a couple issues, namely with some levels going on for too long and some annoying obstacles, but I did come off of a game of a similar style you'll see higher up, so that might have been me. Besides, it's still chaotically good fun. Spark 2 does feel a lot more experimental, but I still do enjoy what it tries to do, and there's plenty of fun moments to be had. And then there's Spark 3. And this was a step in the right direction. This game feels like Pepper looked at what Spark 2 did really well, and fleshed it out more, while ironing out the kinks that came with the experimentation. Spark in general controls like a dream, and all the levels in the game are built with the speed and momentum in mind. Not to mention their settings and the objectives of some of them spice things up tremendously. I can't believe this game made scavenger hunts on a timer actually work. That's nuts! And I still can't believe that this game actually has combat on par with many character action games. There are several different light and heavy attacks that you can use at your leisure. You can manipulate enemy behavior by adapting to their patterns and their health, and you're rewarded for changing up your tactics with the damage multipliers, making enemies go down faster. Huh, that's two games that aren't hack and slashes that have fleshed out fun combat systems. Funny how things work out sometimes. If that's not enough, you can customize your loadout for each level if you want to get through things easier, get specific records, or just play through it as another character, adding in a sizable degree of replay value. Spark 3 in general knows what it wants to do. Give you an intense, blood-pumping, fun adventure, and just goes for it. And combine that with various improvements from Spark 2, especially the better physics, as well as the levels from Spark 2 actually being included as free DLC, and this is a game I know I can come back to for just a simple, yet incredibly fun time.
Well then.
Well, I'm glad things turned out for the better. This game's awesome! Free-to-Play is still a wonderful game that I love revisiting every once in a blue moon for the fun of it all, but man, Freedom 2 is a flat-out improvement all across the board. All three returning characters feel like everything that was great about them was retained, but they also got a lot of new toys to make them even more fun to play with. Carol I especially love, as the disc adds tons of versatility, and the bike now being a separate mode for her, assuming you can fight it in a stage, was a great call. Mila I'm especially thankful they made much more free-flowing. Nira I may not like as much, but I still think she's a very welcome addition, and bosses with her are a blast. In fact, the bosses in general are my favorite part of the game. There's a ton of them, they're truly a spectacle in some form, and they can get generally really tough. Be sure you master each character's dodge ASAP, and get used to using attacks that can deal a ton of damage either in one burst or continuously. They'll help you out big time. All the levels are amazing too. They meet a good compromise between genuine challenge and memorable set pieces, and despite the number of them being much larger than the original game, they all feel distinct in some form. I also appreciate the gear system and how it can be used to make the journey more comfortable, or how you can use it for higher rankings if you want to go that far. I also got a lot out of the story, since it's able to have both cartoony and funny moments, along with more serious ones. I admire how each character has their own arc that is able to interact with what else is going on, and when the game decides to be funny, it can be genuinely hilarious. Right, Carol? Even she's impressed with 2022's game lineup. Go buy this game. It's fantastic. If there's one franchise that I felt especially validated for being a fan of last year, it's Sonic, without a second thought. I mean, the indie projects inspired by it did play a part, but between modern consoles getting what is, in my opinion, the definitive way to play the classic titles, at least if we're not counting fan mods, a fantastic movie that is almost just about what I wanted a Sonic movie to be, a third of a great Netflix show, still not fond of Netflix's practices with this though, and most of all, a brand new 3D entry. I'm still in disbelief that it's been 5 years since Sonic Forces, and while I still do like it and would have been fine with expanding upon the boost formula, Sonic Frontiers in some way did exactly that, but made me appreciate these traits in a completely new way. Placing Sonic in several different open-ended islands did wonders of giving the game a new focus that works. The Starfall Islands are all sprawling with things to do and collect. I really got a lot out of just looking around seeing what I could do, as well as choosing something and zooming over to it at top speed. While the main objective is clear, getting the Chaos Emeralds and all that, what you do in order to get those is all up to you. You can take on groups of enemies or various mini-bosses and brawls that test reflexes and good judgment that are a ton of fun more often than not. You can do one of many obstacle courses that act as levels in a way and see what lies at the end. You can just search around and dig up whatever treasure you find. You can do the cyberspace levels and get keys that way. Or you could just go fishing with Big and grind up on something, even going as far as to get what you need for the Chaos Emeralds. It's crazy how many options they give you to beat this game, and it makes playthroughs diverse if you want to get a move on, and satisfying if completion is your goal. And all of it is fun. Some more than others, sure, but it's admirable just how much this game tries with all that it has. Those Titan battles are definitely a highlight too. It's kind of like they looked at how climactic some bosses in Platinum Games titles can get, and just did that in its own way. Sure, the game does have some jank here and there, and the pop-up is glaring, but aside from those, I have no problem putting this among my favorite titles in this series. And who knows how much it'll be elevated when we get all that free DLC later. If Sonic Team truly wants to use this as the basis for the future of 3D Sonic, then I am ecstatic to see where this goes. Time for some honorable mentions! Xenoblade Chronicles 3. I'm not that far into it as of now, but while I think the game throws way too many enemies to a point where it dilutes the level design, and the series staple of observing where you pick fights, and the intro is a little slow, I do really like how it handles the class system, combat's fun more often than not, and the general story is great. Probably would have made the cut if I got it around launch, but it is what it is. Lunistis, a charming and enjoyable indie 3D platformer that gets weird at the end. Play it, and you'll see what I mean. Mario Strikers Battle League, an immensely fun sports game with plenty of Mario charm. It can also get really chaotic when you play it with others. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge. I think this game does a great job keeping staples of old school beat-em-ups while adding in necessary changes for accessibility. Also, the art style and the animations are wonderful. Super Kiwi 64. It may be short, but with the level variety and Kiwi's ability to climb walls, this is another really fun 3D platformer. I think I can get away with saying that on all fronts, Pokemon fans have gotten it pretty good as of late. Yeah, I know, Jack likes Pokemon and all that funny business, but I'm sorry. When was the last time we had 2 mainline entries in one single year? Both turned out to be absolutely phenomenal games in my eyes, and I think they're both examples of where I think the franchise should go from here. Yes, I agree that a new generation starting every 3 years may not be the best if they want to be this ambitious, given Scarlet and Violet's rather poor optimization, but as games in of themselves, both Pokemon Legends Arceus and Scarlet and Violet are wonderful. However, when I think about it in more detail, I find myself preferring Legends Arceus. There are definitely things I like more in Scarlet and Violet, namely the story, the characters, and the more non-linear approach. But there are so many risks Legends Arceus took that I admire, and the complete package feels just right. The game may progress in a more straightforward fashion, but nothing is stopping you from stepping out and trying to explore all the vast landscapes of Hisui, and do basically whatever you want before you head to the objective marker. Every area is basically a giant playground for you to roam around in, and each ride Pokemon you get as you go along not only enhance this, but also add in a solid amount of replay value, since you absolutely will not reach every point or climb every cliff on your first go. It's also refreshing to see Pokemon generally be pretty hostile, since it gives each part of each area some kind of danger to watch out for. Manipulating their behavioral patterns in order to catch them without ever needing to battle them makes catching Pokemon here the most satisfying it has felt across the entire series, and it needs to come back later. But if you do want to engage them in combat, battles have been made significantly more enjoyable thanks to the agile and strong styles. Battling wild Pokemon and the new alphas always remain blood pumping, and while there aren't that many trainer battles, the ones that are here are some of the best fights in the series. There's tons more to talk about, like the engaging story, strong characters, wonderful changes to relearning moves, thank Arceus this came back in Scarlet and Violet, the numerous collectibles, the more work that has to go into the Pokédex, and the noble Pokemon being a fun time, and a great approach to more traditional boss encounters. But above all else, I think this is one of the best examples of what a Pokemon game should be in my eyes. A grand adventure into an enthralling yet dangerous world to get stronger, yet also bond with the little creatures you befriend along the way. I love exploring Hisui. I love catching all the cool Pokemon I could find. I love jumping into some super dangerous areas. No matter what, I was enamored and I wanted to play more. So much so that I'm actually still questioning whether or not this or Pokemon Black and White 2 is my favorite game of all time. I don't know if I'll have a definitive answer to that right now, but if I'm asking it in the first place, that means that this game truly did something right. I'm Lightning Ripper, and before I sign off, I just want to let you know that I'm still holding my fundraiser for St. Jude's Play Live campaign. I may not have that massive of an audience, but I would like to use this hobby to contribute to St. Jude's continuous work and research to help sick kids. They will always have my thanks for saving so many lives and helping so many people, including a select number close to me, and I do hope they continue to do so. If you like this video, or just my content in general, please consider donating to my campaign, or just to them in general, even if it's just $1. Anything will help them. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you all next time.